In 1971, Soviet engineers lit a single match and expected the fire to die in a week. 55 years later, it still burns. In the Bay of Bengal, an island fires arrows at any aircraft that flies too low. Off the coast of Yemen, trees bleed red sap that hardens into crystal. These are not myths. There are dozens of places like this, and the pattern they form is far darker than any single one of them. One North Sentinel Island, India. A tribe has lived on this island for roughly 60,000 years without ever speaking a single word to the outside world. The Sentinelese kill anyone who lands on their beach. They have done so consistently, deliberately, and without exception for as long as records have existed. The island is small, about 23 square miles of dense jungle ringed by coral reef, sitting in the Bay of Bengal east of India. The Indian government enforces a 5 nautical mile exclusion zone around it. Any boat closer than that is breaking federal law. The reason is not protection of outsiders. It is protection of the tribe itself. In 2006, 2 fishermen drifted ashore while drunk and were killed within minutes of touching sand. In 2018, a 26-year-old American missionary named John Allen Chow bribed local fishermen to drop him near the shore. He was killed the same day. His body was never recovered. Indian authorities watched from a boat as tribesmen dragged him along the beach. A helicopter sent after the 2004 tsunami hovered low to check for survivors. A lone Sentinelese man stepped onto the sand and aimed a 6-foot bow directly at the cockpit. The pilot pulled up immediately. These people have no immunity to the common cold. A single handshake could erase 60,000 years of human history in 14 days. That is why the world stays away. The next entry on this list contains a region the size of a U.S. state, and almost no one inside it knows what year it is. If this kind of story is exactly the depth you came here for, subscribing keeps every Explored Danger upload coming straight to you. 2. Vale do Javari, Brazil. Tucked into Brazil's far northwest sits a protected reserve roughly the size of Maine. Inside it live an estimated 6,000 indigenous people, and at least 16 of those tribes have never been contacted by the outside world. That is the highest concentration of uncontacted humans on the planet. The reserve covers 32,000 square miles of triple canopy rainforest. Most of it has never been mapped on foot. Satellite images show clearings, longhouses, and garden plots. But FUNAI, Brazil's Indigenous Protection Agency, has a strict no-contact policy. Their job is not to find these tribes. Their job is to keep everyone else out. That is harder than it sounds. Illegal gold miners, cocaine smugglers, and unauthorized loggers cross into Javari every week. In June 2022, Indigenous expert Bruno Pereira and British journalist Dom Phillips were ambushed and shot dead while documenting these incursions. Their bodies were found buried in the jungle 10 days later. Walk the edge of this territory and the air is thick enough to feel on your tongue. Insects the size of a quarter land on your arm. Somewhere beyond the next ridge, a child who has never seen a wheel is being born tonight. The Karubo, the Métis, the Flecheros, the Arrow people defend their land with poison-tipped darts that drop a taper in 90 seconds. A single flu strain carried in by a logger could wipe an entire tribe off the earth before sundown. These are not lost peoples. They are hidden by choice, and the choice has cost lives on both sides for 100 years. If you live near a national forest, a reservation, or any kind of protected land, drop your closest equivalent in the comments. People here genuinely read those. 3. Tristan da Cunha, South Atlantic. This is the loneliest inhabited place on Earth. The nearest human being who does not live on Tristan is 1,514 miles away on St. Helena. Cape Town, the closest mainland city, is a 6-day boat ride. There is no airport. There never will be one. The volcano in the middle of the island makes runway construction impossible. Picture a single black volcanic cone rising 6,765 feet straight out of the South Atlantic. Ringed by cliffs of surf has been pounding for 200,000 years. Clouds wrap the summit almost every day of the year. The ocean below is some of the roughest open water on the planet. The population sits at 238 people. Every single resident shares one of just 7 surnames. The genetic pool is so small that asthma rates run near 50%, and several inherited conditions appear here at frequencies seen nowhere else on Earth. In 1961, the volcano erupted without warning. The entire population was evacuated to England. 2 years later, almost every resident voted to return to a destroyed village on an island that had nearly killed them. They rebuilt by hand using the same stone the lava had spared. There is one doctor, one school, one pub that opens twice a week. If your appendix bursts on a Tuesday, the next ship may not arrive until October. That is not an exaggeration. It is the reason new residents must have their appendix removed before they are allowed to move there. Most channels stop at remote. We came here to look at what isolation actually does to a human community over 200 years. If that is the depth you want, subscribe and stay. 4. Oymyakon, Russia. In February 1933, a thermometer in this small Siberian village dropped to minus 89.9 degrees Fahrenheit. That remains the coldest temperature ever recorded in a permanently inhabited place on Earth. About 500 people still live here. At minus 60, exhale breath freezes into ice crystals that hang in the air and fall like glass dust. Eyelashes weld together. Diesel turns to jelly. Standard car batteries die in under 4 minutes. Every working vehicle in town stays running 24 hours a day from October to March, because a stopped engine is a dead engine until spring. Step outside without a face covering and exposed skin freezes in roughly 90 seconds. Frostbite arrives before pain does. By the time your nose hurts, the tissue is already gone. In 2018, a local school teacher named Anastasia Gruzdiva posted a selfie at minus 88. Her hair had frozen into a solid sheet across her shoulders. The photograph went viral worldwide. For her, it was a Tuesday. The diet is not optional. Reindeer meat, frozen raw fish shaved into thin strips, and horse blood. These are not delicacies. They are the only foods that supply the calories a human body needs to maintain core temperature here. Vegetables cannot be grown. They must be flown in, and they freeze before they reach the shelf. Burials require a 3-day fire to thaw the ground enough for a shovel. If you have ever stood outside in single-digit weather and thought you understood cold, drop a comment and tell us where. The number Oymyakon hits is on a different scale entirely. 5. La Rinconada, Peru. 50,000 people live at 16,732 feet above sea level, higher than any base camp on Everest. There is no sewage system. There is no running water. The town smells year-round like burnt mercury and human waste freezing in open ditches. The reason anyone is here is gold. The mountain above La Rinconada holds one of the richest unworked seams left in South America. Miners work under a system called Cocorio, 30 days of unpaid labor in exchange for one shift where they keep whatever they can carry out on their backs. Most carry nothing. Some carry fortune. At this altitude, oxygen is roughly half what your lungs are used to. Newcomers vomit for 3 days. Long-term residents develop chronic mountain sickness, thickened blood, swollen hearts, and red blood cell counts so high the blood moves like syrup. Life expectancy here sits around 30 to 35 years. Mercury is used to separate gold from rock. It is poured by hand with no protective equipment into open pans. The runoff flows into the only stream the town drinks from. Children play in tailings ponds that glow faintly blue. A 2012 study found mercury levels in local women's hair at 28 times the World Health Organization's safe limit. The mine shafts above the town flood without warning. In 2019, a collapse buried 11 miners under 200 feet of ice and rock. Recovery was never attempted. The bodies are still up there. Roughly 50,000 people knowingly chose this town over the life they had before. The CTA writes itself, this is not entertainment. Share this video with someone who needs a perspective. 6. Itokakorormite, Greenland. The name means the place with the big houses. There are 345 of them, give or take. The town sits on the eastern coast of Greenland, 500 miles from the next settlement in any direction. To reach it, you fly to Iceland, take a second flight to a gravel airstrip, then board a helicopter that only flies in clear weather. Clear weather here happens about 40 days a year. The harbor freezes solid for 9 months. During those months, the only way out is by snowmobile across the sea ice. and the sea ice has become unreliable. Hunters now fall through cracks that did not exist a decade ago. 3 men have been lost this way since 2019. The polar night lasts from late November to mid-January. 53 consecutive days without the sun rising. Streetlights stay on around the clock. Children walk to school in full darkness, then home again in full darkness. And this is normal. The economy runs on hunting: narwhal, polar bear, musk ox, and seal. Quotas are strict. A hunter may take 1 polar bear every 3 years, by tradition and by law. The meat feeds an extended family for months. Polar bears walk through town. Not occasionally, frequently. Every house keeps a loaded rifle near the door, not as decoration, as policy. A child cannot play outside without an adult scanning the horizon first. The retention loop ahead involves an American village so isolated that the U.S. Postal Service still delivers mail by mule. If Arctic stories are what brought you here, hit subscribe. There's a full Greenland deep dive in the queue. 7. Supai Village, Arizona. The U.S. government officially classifies this as the most remote community in the lower 48 states. About 208 members of the Havasupai tribe live here, at the bottom of a side canyon, the Grand Canyon, 8 miles down a hiking trail with no road access of any kind. Mail arrives by mule. Groceries arrive by mule. A refrigerator, a washing machine, a hospital bed. All of it goes down strapped to the back of a pack animal. The mules make the trip twice a day, every day, in 110-degree summer heat. Stand at the trailhead at Hualapai Hilltop and look down. The canyon drops 2,000 feet in a series of switchbacks carved into red sandstone. There is no railing. There is no cell signal. From here on, you are on tribal land, and the only way out is the same way you came in, on foot, by mule, or by helicopter that only flies on weekdays. In 2008, a flash flood ripped through the canyon at night. The wall of water was 11 feet tall. It destroyed homes, killed livestock, and reshaped the riverbed. Every resident was evacuated by helicopter. The village rebuilt on slightly higher ground. Medical emergencies are catastrophic by definition. The nearest hospital is 60 miles away by air. A heart attack in Supai is essentially a death sentence unless a helicopter is already in the canyon. And yet the Havasupai have lived in this exact spot for over 800 years. They have been told to leave more than once. They have refused every time. Drop the most remote place you have ever personally driven, hiked, or flown to in the comments. People who watch this channel have been to genuinely surprising places. 8. Amundsen Scott South Pole Station, Antarctica. This is the only permanently staffed building at the geographic South Pole. It sits on a moving ice sheet 9,301 feet thick. The whole structure drifts about 33 feet per year toward the Weddell Sea. Every few decades, the marker for true 90 degrees south has to be physically dug up and moved. In winter, the temperature averages minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit. The lowest reading ever recorded at the station was minus 117. At those temperatures, a metal wrench bonds to bare skin instantly. Boiling water thrown into the air freezes before it hits the ground. From mid-February to late October, no aircraft can land. The fuel inside a plane gels before the wheels touch the ice. For 8 months a year, the 40 to 50 winter over crew are more isolated than astronauts on the International Space Station. A medevac is genuinely impossible. In 1999, the station doctor, Jerry Nielsen, discovered a lump in her own breast during winter. She self-administered chemotherapy, using drugs airdropped from AC-141 that could not land. She survived. She wrote a book about it. The story is the entire reason backup positions are now standard. The sun rises once a year and sets once a year. Each of those events takes about 24 hours. Between them, you get 6 months of unbroken daylight followed by 6 months of unbroken night, with stars so bright the Milky Way casts shadows on the snow. Selection psychology testing for winter over crew is more rigorous than NASA's astronaut screening. The next entry leaves the surface entirely and drops 7 miles straight down into the most alien environment on this planet. If extreme environment science is your lane, the subscribe button keeps that lane wide open. 9. The Mariana Trench, Pacific Ocean. At its deepest point, Challenger Deep. The floor of the Mariana Trench sits 35,876 feet below the surface of the Pacific Ocean. Mount Everest dropped point down into this trench, with over a mile of water above its summit. Only 27 humans have ever been there. More people have walked on the moon. The pressure at the bottom is 16,000 pounds per square inch. That is roughly the equivalent of 50 jumbo jets stacked on top of a single human body. A standard submarine implodes long before reaching even half this depth. The vehicles that survive down there are titanium spheres engineered to fail safe under conditions that erase normal physics. There is no light. The last photons from the surface die out around 3,300 feet. From there to the bottom is over 6 vertical miles of absolute black. The water sits at just above freezing. There are no currents. Nothing moves except what lives there. And things live there. Snailfish drift over the silt at 26,000 feet, bodies translucent, organs visible through skin thinner than tissue paper. Amphipods the size of footballs scavenge whatever drifts down. In 2019, explorer Victor Vescovo reached Challenger Deep in a custom submersible and found a plastic shopping bag on the seabed. That is the part that stays with researchers. The deepest place on Earth is no longer untouched. Less than 5% of the global ocean floor has been mapped to high resolution. The rest is genuinely unknown territory on the planet you live on. If that one fact rearranged something in your head, the comment section is the right place to say so. 10. Blood Falls, Antarctica. A waterfall pours out of the side of the Taylor Glacier in East Antarctica. The water is the color of arterial blood. It stains the white ice for hundreds of feet downslope. From the air, it looks like the glacier has been cut open. It was first documented in 1911 by Australian geologist Griffith Taylor. For nearly a century, no one could explain it. Theories range from red algae to rare bacterial blooms to outright mythology among early Antarctic crews who refused to camp within sight of it. The truth, confirmed in 2017, is stranger than the speculation. Trapped beneath the glacier sits a lake of brine roughly 5 times salter than seawater. It has been sealed under the ice for at least 1.5 million years. It has no oxygen, no light, and a temperature of about 17 degrees Fahrenheit, well below freezing, but kept liquid by the salt. Living inside that lake is a community of microbes that survives by metabolizing iron and sulfur. When the brine finally finds a crack and reaches open air, the iron oxidizes on contact with oxygen. The result is rust in liquid form, pouring out of a glacier in the most isolated continent on Earth. NASA studies this site directly. The conditions inside that subglacial lake, total isolation, extreme cold, no sunlight, chemical-based metabolism, are the closest analog on Earth to what scientists believe may exist beneath the ice of Jupiter's moon Europa. If life can survive 1.5 million years sealed under a glacier, what else is sealed under glaciers we have not drilled into yet? Subscribe for the answer when the science arrives. 11. Darvaza Crater, Turkmenistan. The locals call it the door to hell. In 1971, Soviet geologists drilling for natural gas in the Karakum Desert struck a massive underground cavern. The drilling rig collapsed into it. Toxic methane began venting into nearby villages. The engineers made a decision that seemed reasonable at the time. Light the gas on fire and let it burn off in a week. The crater is 226 feet across and 98 feet deep. It has been on fire continuously for 55 years. Walk to the edge at night, and the heat hits you from 30 feet away. The roar sounds like a jet engine that never powers down. The flames are not orange. They are deep red and pale yellow, with blue tongues licking the inner walls where pure methane vents through cracks. The desert around the rim glows visibly from orbit. In 2013, Canadian explorer George Karinis became the first person to descend into the crater. He wore a custom Kevlar suit and breathing apparatus and was lowered on a heat-resistant line. His mission was to collect soil samples from the floor. What he found was extremophile bacteria, life forms thriving in the burning sand at temperatures that would kill anything on the surface. Turkmenistan's government has tried to extinguish the fire twice. In 2010, the president ordered it sealed. The order was quietly abandoned. In 2022, he tried again. The fire is still burning today. The gas reserves feeding it are vast enough that geologists genuinely do not know when or if the flames will ever stop on their own. Most travel channels mention this place in 30 seconds. We came here to actually understand it. Subscribe, and that depth is the standard. 12. Lake Natron, Tanzania. The water in Lake Natron has a pH of 10.5. That is the alkalinity of household ammonia. The temperature can reach 140 degrees Fahrenheit at the surface. Animals that fall in and cannot get out are turned to stone within hours. Photographer Nick Brandt documented this in 2013. He found bats, eagles, and flamingos around the shoreline of the lake, not skeletons, but full bodies, calcified into rigid ash-white statues, posed exactly as they had died. The sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate in the water preserve soft tissue while turning it to stone. The lake sits in a rift valley in northern Tanzania, fed by hot springs loaded with minerals leached from the surrounding volcanoes. From above, it is the color of rust streaked with red, a result of the salt-loving microorganisms that are the only things that can live in it. Almost the only things. Lesser flamingos, about 2.5 million of them, use natron as their primary breeding ground in East Africa. They are the single species evolved to wade in water that would dissolve a human eyeball in 10 seconds. Their leg scales are unusually thick. Their nasal passages filter the alkaline mist. Chicks hatched here imprint on a chemistry that would kill almost any other vertebrate on Earth. If a flamingo's chick falls before it can fly, it sinks into the soda crust along the shore. By morning, the body is rigid, white, and looks carved from marble. The next entry rises 24,840 feet, and not a single human being has ever stood on its summit. By law, if that combination is unusual enough to keep you watching, the like button is what tells YouTube to keep recommending this channel. 13. Gangkar Puensum, Bhutan. This is the highest unclimbed mountain on Earth. The summit sits at 24,840 feet, on the border between Bhutan and Tibet. It is the 40th tallest mountain in the world. Every taller peak has been climbed multiple times. This one has never been touched, for expeditions attempted it between 1985 and 1986. None reached the top. Weather, route finding failures, and avalanche conditions turned every team back. After the 1994 expedition was canceled, the Bhutanese government banned all climbing on peaks above 19,685 feet. In 2003, they banned mountaineering entirely. The reason is religious. In Bhutanese Buddhism, high peaks are the homes of protective deities. Standing on the summit of a sacred mountain is not adventure, it is desecration. The government will not budge on this. Multiple foreign expeditions have offered substantial sums for a single permit. Every offer has been declined. The mountain itself is brutal. It rises in a single uninterrupted phase from the valley floor, with no easy ridgelines and no obvious route to the top. Storms form on the summit with almost no warning. Local porters refuse to camp within sight of it. They say the mountain decides who comes near. Climber Steve Barry, who attempted the peak in 1986, later wrote that his team turned around at 23,000 feet, not because of weather, but because the entire group felt, collectively without speaking, that they did not belong any higher. There are roughly 14 peaks in the world above 26,000 feet. Every single one has been summited. This 24,840-foot mountain has not. Some places stay untouched not because they cannot be reached, but because the people who own them say no. Drop in the comments. Should peaks like this stay closed forever? Honest answers, not hot takes. 14. Mount Roraima, Venezuela. A flat-topped mountain rises 9,219 feet straight out of rainforest, where Venezuela, Brazil, and Guyana meet. The summit plateau covers 12 square miles. The walls are vertical sandstone cliffs nearly 1,300 feet tall on every side. Clouds wrap the top almost every day of the year. This is a tepe, a tabletop mountain, and Roraima is the largest of them. The ecosystem on top has been physically separated from the surrounding jungle for roughly 2 billion years. Species evolved up there exist nowhere else on Earth. A black frog the size of a thumbnail, found only on Roraima, cannot swim and cannot jump. It has lived in pure isolation long enough to forget how. The first recorded ascent was in 1884 by British botanist Everard M. Thurn. His report inspired Arthur Conan Doyle to write The Lost World, a novel about prehistoric creatures stranded on top of an isolated plateau. Doyle was writing fiction. The biology underneath was not. The summit is a maze. Black, water-eroded sandstone shaped into pillars, sinkholes, and pools. Visibility drops to 10 feet in the cloud layer. There are no trail markers. Hikers have wandered off the standard route and not been found for days. In 2017, a Brazilian tourist disappeared near the summit and was located alive 6 days later, severely hypothermic, less than a mile from his guide. The climb itself takes 6 days round trip and follows a single natural ramp, the only place in 30 miles where the cliff is not vertical. A retention loop is overdue. The next entry contains a mountain range that wasn't even seen by Western eyes until 1958. If you have summited anything serious, drop the elevation in the comments. People here respect real numbers. 15. The Star Mountains, Papua New Guinea. Western explorers did not lay eyes on these mountains until 1958. Inside this range, valleys exist that have still never been entered on foot by an outside expedition. Aerial mapping is incomplete. Some peaks do not have official elevations recorded, only estimates from satellite passes. The range runs about 100 miles along the central spine of New Guinea, climbing to 12,861 feet at Mount Capella. The slopes are covered in cloud forests so dense that a person standing 20 feet away can be invisible. Annual rainfall in some valleys exceeds 320 inches. That is more than 26 feet of water falling from the sky every year. The Min peoples, the Telefomen, the Wapkamen, the Faywoman, have lived in these valleys for thousands of years. First contact for some clans came in the 1960s. A few groups in remote tributaries are believed to have remained uncontacted into the 1980s. In 1984, a small Australian-led expedition disappeared in the Central Star Range. 2 members were found weeks later, severely emaciated, having survived by drinking water collected from leaves. The third was never recovered. The terrain itself does the work. Limestone karst dissolves into vertical pinnacles, sinkholes 600 feet deep, and underground rivers that have never been mapped. A misstep into a covered hole means a fall no rescue team can reach. Several caves in this range are believed to be among the deepest on Earth, but expeditions to fully descend them have been called off due to cost and logistics. Biologists estimate that hundreds of plant and animal species in these mountains remain unknown to science. Every survey expedition that reaches a new valley brings back something that has never been named. If exploration content is your thing, the subscribe button is where you lock it in. 16. The Darien Gap, Colombia, Panama. The Pan-American Highway runs from Alaska to the southern tip of Argentina. 19,000 miles of continuous road. It breaks in exactly one place. A 66-mile stretch of jungle and swamp between Panama and Colombia. There is no road. There has never been a road. There likely never will be. The reason is a combination of geography, politics, and active warfare. The Darien is dense triple canopy rainforest cut by 100-foot deep ravines and rivers that flood without warning. It is also controlled in significant stretches by guerrilla groups, drug cartels, and human smugglers. The Colombian government does not have a meaningful presence inside it. Neither does Panama. In 2023 alone, more than 520,000 migrants crossed the Darien on foot, most of them headed for the United States. The route takes 5 to 10 days. The terrain claims lives every week. Bodies recovered along the trail show injuries from falls, drowning, snake bites, and violence at the hands of armed robbers who target migrant groups. Doctors Without Borders treated more than 1,000 cases of sexual violence inside the Darien in 2023. The actual number is believed to be several times higher. Most assaults are never reported because the survivors are still trying to reach the next checkpoint. The wildlife is a third predator. Fer-de-lance vipers, bullet ants, jaguars, and freshwater stingrays live in concentrations that biologists describe as some of the highest on Earth. Jungle rot can take a foot in 4 days if a wound goes untreated. This is not adventure tourism. This is a corridor that has become one of the deadliest migration routes on the planet. Share this entry with someone who has only ever seen the Darien mentioned as a road that does not exist. 17. Sakha Republic Wilderness, Siberia. The Sakha Republic covers 1.18 million square miles of northeastern Russia. That is larger than Argentina. Fewer than 1 million people live in the entire region. Outside its scattered towns lies one of the largest continuous uninhabited wildernesses on Earth. The land is built on permafrost, soil that has been frozen solid for at least the last 40,000 years. In recent summers, that permafrost has begun to thaw. The thaw is not gradual. It happens in collapses. In 2014, a sinkhole opened in the Yamal region, 260 feet across, 130 feet deep, walls of pure ice. Locals heard the explosion from miles away. Methane, trapped in the frozen ground for tens of thousands of years, had pressurized and detonated. 13 more craters like it have appeared since. The Batagaica crater in central Sakha is the largest of these features, a 0.6-mile long gash in the earth that grows by roughly 33 feet a year. Inside its walls, scientists have pulled the carcass of a 42,000-year-old foal, complete with mane and tail, perfectly preserved by the cold. They have found cave lion cubs, mammoth tusks the size of canoe paddles. Walking the edge of Batagaica is dangerous. The walls calve without warning. The air smells of thawing earth and methane, sweet, organic, and faintly wrong. Vast sections of the Republic have never been crossed on foot by anyone except indigenous Yakut and Evenki herders. Modern maps show topography. They do not show what is buried in it. The thaw is releasing carbon stored before humans walked upright. Each new crater is a piece of prehistory unsealing itself in real time. If Climate and Extremes content is your channel, lock to subscribe. There's more of this coming. 18. Socotra Island, Yemen. A 2,200 square mile island sits 240 miles off the coast of Yemen in the Arabian Sea. Roughly a third of its plant species exists nowhere else on Earth. Walking through its valleys looks less like Earth and more like a movie set someone forgot to break down. The island has been geographically isolated for at least 6 million years. In that span, evolution went its own direction. The most famous result is a dragon blood tree, a tree shaped exactly like an open umbrella, with trunks that bleed dark red sap when cut. The locals harvest the sap, which hardens into crystals used for dye, varnish, and traditional medicine. There are also bottle trees that swell to the width of a car and store water in their trunks, cucumber trees that grow on bare rock, frankincense trees that have been tapped for resin since before the time of the pharaohs. Socotra has roughly 60,000 human inhabitants. They speak Sakhatri, a Semitic language with no written form, descended from a branch of Arabic that split off over 2,000 years ago. Many residents still live in cave systems on the island's interior cliffs. Modernization is proceeding, but slowly. There is one paved road on the entire island. The danger here is not natural. Yemen has been at civil war since 2015. Socotra has been pulled into a tug of war between Yemeni government forces, Saudi-backed militias, and Emirati troops. UNESCO has flagged the island's biosphere as critically threatened by goats overgrazing endemic seedlings, by climate change shifting monsoon patterns, and by armed conflict that has shut down most scientific research. If a dragon blood tree collapses on Socotra and no biologist is allowed to record it, has a species been lost? Drop your answer below. 19. Kamchatka Peninsula, Russia. A peninsula the size of California juts off the eastern coast of Russia into the Pacific. It contains 160 volcanoes. 29 of them are actively erupting on a regular cycle. It is the highest concentration of active volcanism anywhere on the planet. For most of the 20th century, Kamchatka was a closed Soviet military zone. Foreigners were forbidden. Even Russian citizens needed special permits to enter. Roads were never built into most of the interior. The peninsula was strategically important and intentionally left blank on civilian maps. That history is the reason Kamchatka still looks the way it does. There are no highways crossing it. Most of it is reached only by helicopter. The Valley of Geysers, a 4-mile stretch holding around 90 active geysers, was discovered by Soviet scientists in 1941 and is still one of the largest geyser fields on Earth, second only to Yellowstone. In 2007, A massive mudslide buried two-thirds of the valley in seconds. Geysers that had erupted on predictable schedules for thousands of years went silent. Some have since reopened. Others are gone permanently. Brown bears roam the peninsula at densities of about 1 per square mile. The Kamchatka brown bear is one of the largest bear subspecies in the world. Males commonly exceed 1,300 pounds. Salmon runs are so heavy that bears stand shoulder to shoulder along rivers and barely look up when an aircraft passes overhead. In 2020, a mass marine die-off blackened the Kalatursky beach. Surfers reported chemical burns on their skin. The cause was eventually traced to a toxic algal bloom, the kind that climate models predict will become more frequent. The next and final entry is not a place humans can stand on. Stay for it. 20. Point Nemo, South Pacific. There is a single point on Earth that is farther from land than any other. It sits at 48 degrees, 52 minutes south latitude, and 123 degrees, 23 minutes west longitude. The closest land in any direction is 1,670 miles away. The closest humans, when they pass overhead, are astronauts on the International Space Station, roughly 254 miles up. Point Nemo does not appear on most maps because there is nothing there to mark. No island, no buoy, no lighthouse, just open Pacific Ocean in every direction for over 1,000 miles. The water above it is almost biologically dead. This stretch of the South Pacific Gyre has some of the lowest nutrient levels in the global ocean. Fewer marine organisms live here than almost anywhere else. This is why space agencies use it as a graveyard. Decommissioned satellites, spent rocket stages, and at least one entire space station, Russia's Mir, deorbited in 2001, have been deliberately crashed into the waters around Point Nemo. The Chinese Tiangong-1, the European ATV cargo vehicles, and roughly 263 other spacecraft are scattered across its seafloor. The planned re-entry of the International Space Station, currently scheduled for around 2031, will end here. The seafloor below Point Nemo is one of the least mapped environments on Earth. We have higher resolution maps of the surface of Mars. In 1997, oceanographers recorded a deep, low-frequency sound from this region that they could not identify. They called it the bloop. It was eventually attributed to ice cracking in Antarctica, but the recording is genuinely unsettling, and it remains the loudest underwater sound ever captured. 20 places. Every one of them real. Every one of them on the same planet you woke up on this morning. Some viewers watching this have been in corners of the world most people only see on screens. Long-haul sailors, Arctic researchers, missionaries, oil rig medics, demobilized soldiers, expedition guides. If you are one of those people, the comment section is where your story belongs. We read those, and so do other viewers who came here for the real version of the world. Subscribe to Explore Danger, and the next 20 places we cover will land in your feed the day they go live.